Do you wave your terrible towel when Renegade plays? Reach for a tasty cake when JJ shouts, "He scores!" Does the sound of an F1 engine make your heart race? Doing push-ups with a Nittany Lion after a TD? Then lend us an ear, and we will share the exhilaration of Steelers football, the excitement of Flyers hockey, the nail-biting finishes of F1, and the pride when we yell, "We are Penn State." Welcome to the SteelFlyers Show, the strangest combination of sports fandom since pineapple was put on pizza.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the SteelFlyers Podcast. It's now a video cast. Hey, what do you know? What do you think? By the way, we're sitting here with the main man, Pots and Pans, Mr. Gage. Ryan, how you doing, Gage?
Oh, sensational. How's it going, my friend?
Oh, my gosh. I can't believe that it's June 14th, and we're going to start talking about football.
Yeah.
Right?
Thank the Lord.
You know, okay, all right, cool. So we're going to talk about some football here, and of course, we're going to be talking about Steelers football. That's right, folks. I'm your host, Ron SteelFlyers, and we're sitting in here with Gage, and we're going to be talking about the draft and, of course, the obvious quarterback room change that's happened for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And right now, Pittsburgh Steelers are in the throes of a mini camp. Right, and they did finish OTAs back at the end of May, and then I believe Aron Rodgers was signed right before mandatory mini camp, right?
Yeah. So he was signed right around that time where he didn't have to do a lot of those early on activities, which, I mean, there's an argument there of should he go there so he gets more familiar with who he's playing with and whatnot. But then again, if it was any other quarterback, I would probably agree with that. But it's Aron Rodgers. He's a lizard person. He kind of is who he is. And so, I mean,
okay,
those kind
all
of
right.
mini camp things just I don't think really pertain to him in the same way.
And you know what? I do kind of understand why a lot of times the vets kind of stay away, because a lot of times those mini camps are when the rookies first get there, the first time they suit up, and a lot of times it's those guys that are, you know, the stars of the show that getting the most reps. You know what I mean? And a lot of times the vets are just like, okay, we're here, but we're not really, you know. Anyway, not all.
Yeah, Kendrick Green at fullback kind of stuff.
Exactly. Exactly. So let's talk about the elephant in the room here, Gage, and that is, of course, the Aron Rodgers signing. And I think we heard all of Steeler Nation do a collective something when he was signed. I'm very interested in what you feel that Steeler Nation did the day that Aron Rodgers was announced that he signed.
It seemed like a collective groan to me for the most part. There was a small percentage of people that seemed, well, I wouldn't say small percentage. Let's call it like a little less than half who were trying to be optimistic about it, and a little more than half who were like, are you guys out of your GD mind? It was a really, really polarizing decision, as we say. A lot of times polarizing decision just means unpopular decision. This is definitely one of those.
So you feel it was kind of a 50-50, kind of a groan, kind of an unpopular kind of thing. Okay. You know, I look at what the pundits all said, and I look at what all the talking heads all said, and they all kind of had the same kind of thing. Oh, it improves the Steelers' chances and this, that, and everything else. And then, yeah, right. And I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, well, wait a minute. So let's see if I figured this out here. He went down at the very first series in the first game in the first week and missed the entire, what? Almost the entire year, came back for like the last game or two.
No, literally was out the entire season.
Okay, and then came back the next season, right?
Right.
Okay, and then what? Did he play that whole season?
He went 5-12.
5-12. Okay. Yeah, okay, right? And he got what, $19 million?
Something like that. I mean, there's something to be said that like down the stretch of there, if we want to be completely fair and completely unbiased, you can argue that through the last little bit of stretch of his Jets tenure that things started to improve to some degree. But that being said, there's still just a drastic difference between a 42-year-old Rodgers and MVP form Rodgers from 6-ish years ago.
I mean, especially after the injury that he had.
Yes.
And the surgery that he had to do, which I believe, if I'm not mistaken, was almost the same exact injury that took Dan Marino out. It was an Achilles rupture where the Achilles tendon actually separated from you know what I mean, like a complete rupture of the tendon, and they had to have it surgically removed. And I remember Dan Marino having like 2 or 3 bouts with that, and that pretty much ended his career with that. You know what I mean? And so you, especially being 42 now, going to be 43, and you're dealing with such a major injury like that. Okay.
There is just some kind of like diminishing returns at some point. Like, I don't think there's really a whole lot of Pittsburghers that are walking into the season thinking, yep, Aron's going to play great. He's going to play great most of the time, and he's going to play great through 17 games. Like, I think that's a little rich even for the most optimistic of us. I think that he'll be, let's say, upper mid tier, best case scenario, and like a worst case scenario where he completely falls off a cliff. There is kind of this gigantic gap where there are a lot of possibilities, but does it ultimately get us closer to a Super Bowl? I don't really know about that.
Okay, I do like your optimism. I can see it. I can kind of hear it, what you're talking about. You know what I mean? I really feel that this was. I really don't like this move at all. I really disagree with this move 100%. I would much rather have kept Russell Wilson, because at least you know what you have. You know what I mean? And the fact that they let Justin Fields go and Russell Wilson go, they didn't select a quarterback, which the quarterback that they did select, they didn't select until the 6th round.
I'll lightly stick up for Will Howard a little bit because he seems like he's a lot better than a 6th-round pick. Not necessarily a 1st or a 2nd-round pick, don't get me wrong, but like
I agree.
A Mason Rudolph-ish maybe kind of level, I could see
that. He okay. Here's the problem though, okay? And this was the same thing with Kenny Pickett when Pittsburgh selected Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett basically graded out to be a backup quarterback at best. He did not even grade out to be even a part-time starter. Okay, right? And Will Howard is not grading out any better. You know what I mean? So, okay.
I've heard a couple people call him Kenny Pickett too. I've heard that before.
Okay, well, he did take them to a national championship. He did have some pretty good players on Ohio State playing. They had an amazing defense. Okay, it ain't like he was back there lighting it up. Okay, those games were close. Ohio State was fighting it out. You know what I mean? So I just really feel that they should have just kept what they had at some measures, either Justin Fields or Russell Wilson, one or the two, because you almost virtually paid Aron Rodgers the same amount of money you would have paid Russell Wilson or Justin Fields.
I mean, I know that you don't really make decisions. You don't really make roster personnel decisions, and you certainly don't make monetary based decisions off of vibes. But that being said, I think it would have been a little better for the locker room had we not had a sociopath like Aron Rodgers in it. I'm just being honest. Russell Wilson, he wasn't going to win you a championship either, but at least he seemed to be pretty content with the whole mentor role thing. Him and Justin Fields got along since like college. I think they said
agreed.
when Justin was in college, he was
Yeah.
writing to Russell Wilson and all
Yeah.
that stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
I didn't mind that. I thought Justin showed, but here's what I think it boiled down to with the Justin Fields thing is that Justin wanted them to commit to him for the future, and they weren't willing to do that. And now we're stuck with Aaron Rodgers.
And there you have it. Okay. So, okay. Well, okay. I think we've kind of put that into the ground, I think, to some point. I have a prediction about what I think, but I don't want to say it because I don't want to be, a negative Nelly here on things. I hope the best for Aaron Rodgers. That's all I can say. Don't be surprised if we see Mason Rudolph um, 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 steer the ship here towards the end of the season. Just saying, be prepared for Mason Rudolph to play more than you think he's gonna.
I mean, does anybody think that Aaron Rodgers is going to play all 17 games? Like, I don't know. I don't think even his biggest supporters think that's going to happen.
I don't even think he's gonna think that.
No, we're definitely going to see young Mace Rude. I'd like to see a little bit of Will Howard, see what happens, but
we're going to see him in the preseason, right? We're definitely going to be right. We're definitely going to see him in the preseason. We're going to see what he's going to look like. We're going to see if he can be the practice squad guy or the emergency third quarterback or whatever the case is. Or I don't think he's going to beat Mason Rudolph out of the second string job as far as that's concerned. You know what I mean? Pittsburgh is going to be dealing with a lot of change this coming year, especially with the loss of Najee Harris. Okay, and you got the electric meatball in Jaylen Warren. Okay, but you went out and drafted a guy too, who in Caleb Johnson. Okay, and you got some guys on the team, and you went out and got DK Metcalf. Okay, and then you got rid of George Pickens. You had two number one guys on the team, and what are your thoughts on the George Pickens thing, man? That just kind of look. Pittsburgh has got a serious issue with wide receivers since like what 2017, right? It started with Mike Wallace, I think, or something. Right?
Oh,
then
God,
we had Plaxico Burress, then we had Martavis Bryant, then we had what? Okay, all right.
I always thought that like you could make a very loose comparison from George Pickens to Plexico Burress, like in that they're both really talented, but do you necessarily want to pay them wide receiver one money? No, not really.
Okay.
And I think that if memory serves me correctly, this is 20 bloody years ago. So if I'm off a little bit, forgive me. But I think it boiled down to like they were either going to pay Hines or they were going to pay Plexico after 2004, and they chose to keep Hines and they let Plex walk. And so it strikes me as almost a similar situation. Not that DK was on the team before, but it feels roughly similar. I mean, I loved those like South Park edits where it showed DK on one side and George Pickens on the other, and it was like opposing defensive backs have got to deal with this that just sounded perfect to me. But it almost seemed too bad news Bears ish, and of course, lo and behold, they get rid of George Pickens because I think even Mike Tomlin wasn't going to be able to contain that friggin' boiling pot of water.
I mean, like he hasn't been able to contain any of the boiling pots of water. Look at how the Le'Veon Bell thing happened. Look at how the Antonio Brown thing went. Look at how the Cedric Wilson thing went. Look at how the Santonio Holmes thing went. I mean, I just keep rattling them off. Okay, all right. Seems like there's an issue there, Mike, with the wide receivers. Might want to fix that there, guys. All right. What's your overall grade on the draft this year with what Steelers did as far as okay, they got Derek Harmon, a defensive tackle from Oregon. Okay, they got Jack Sawyer, an outside linebacker from Ohio State. They even picked up Mark Bruner's son, Carson Bruner, like in the 7th round, and then of course they got Will Howard. You know what I mean? So, what will be your overall grade of the Steelers for the draft this year?
It feels a little light to me. yeah. So okay, Derek Harmon's good pick. Jack Sawyer, good pick. Yeah, Black. I don't hate that pick either. I've actually heard that's a little bit of a under the radar pick from some people, or at least in some people's eyes. Will
Yeah.
Howard, I kind of like. I know that John Gruden doesn't have the best reputation anymore, and he kind of has the habit of like blowing QBs out of proportion, talking about why aren't you the number one overall pick? And it's like because he got taken in the 6th round, sir. That's like, you know what I mean?
And he grades out at a 5.9, sir. That's why.
It's kind of crazy, but yeah, like when he says why aren't you the number one quarterback in the draft, you kind of interpret that as like you're underrated and that you should leave it at that. So I like Will Howard in that regard. I think that he'll be okay. Like I said, I think that he'll probably be a decent backup or so. So
Okay.
it strikes me as a little light. I'd probably, again, if you asked me to grade it, probably a B or a B minus, and that's fine. It is what it is.
Okay. All right. I mean, we definitely got some need. We definitely got positions of need.
Yeah.
More so than we got the best player available, I think. Okay. So and that's the difference, I think. Huh?
Unflashy.
Yeah. And that's the difference, I think, between Kevin Gilbride and Omar. Where Omar is kind of addressing the need and not necessarily going after maybe I'm wrong here now. This is the second draft in a row now where we've had guys that have not necessarily been the top of the heap guys. They just kind of been, you know what I mean? And so this is what you get when you're picking middle of the road as well, too. You know what I'm saying? So, all right.
Yeah.
So you're saying about a B minus.
Yeah, I appreciate that they're taking the Eagles approach. I know they brought in Andy, what's his name, and I know that he was part of the Philly roster for a little while, doing a lot of their roster moves. And I know that they're very heavy on picking in the first round either an O lineman or a D lineman. And what did we do this year? D lineman. What did we do last year? O lineman.
O lineman.
Like, you can tell they're taking the same approach, and I really appreciate that because it means that we're not focusing on keeping guys like Chuks Okorafor around. No offense to Chuks Okorafor, but like I hated that we kept him like 3 years longer than we should have.
Okay, yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. Though, you know what I mean. We definitely needed an upgrade in that position. You know what I mean. and I think we're going to see a little bit here, some offensive line. I think I'm hoping. This is what I'm hoping. Okay, I'm really hoping that we can see some offensive line gel come together in camp, like because that's what that needs to really happen. Do you know what I mean? I want to see everybody in their right places. Okay, where we're gonna have everybody a year older, a year more experienced. Okay, because you got an old man back there. Okay, who's gonna be about 3 steps, and that's it. So you got to be quick and hold for at least 5 seconds because he needs at least that long to get back and throw it.
And he is not going to be reading the defenses. The Dark Lord Cthulhu will be directly telling Aaron Rodgers where to throw the football. So it's going to be a pretty wild year.
Like I said, you're only going to be getting about 5 or 6 seconds, and they're going to be coming. They're pinning their heads, their ears back because he's an old man. And I guarantee you that 90% of his snaps are going to be in the shotgun, just like last year of Ben, right? Shotgun throw. He doesn't have to worry about the rush. He doesn't have to worry about reading defenses. Okay. And I could be wrong, but I just see that's how it's going to happen, right? Let's see. My take on the draft. I'm going to be a little harsher, and I'm going to say C. Grade C, just C.
That's fair.
I wasn't impressed nearly with the picks that they had this year. Yes, they did kind of address some need, but they didn't get the best, I think, athlete at that position per se. You know what I mean? So we'll see how it goes, right? Training camp's going to be coming up here real soon, right? You know what I mean? So I don't even want to say any predictions on anything, right? Because we're gonna keep going doing this, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. And also predictions in and of itself, like especially at this point of the year, are so finicky.
I mean, everybody looks good in shorts and helmets.
Yes, 100%.
Except for Wilson.
True.
Right? Like you're reading the same things I'm reading, right? Where he has not been having very good practices. He's dropping a lot of passes
and didn't they say that Wilson is also like he had the same problems last year whenever he suited up for us, that he was also struggling in camp? I don't get it.
Hey man, like I said, they need to readjust the wide receiver room in there and figure out what's going on, and maybe figure out how to evaluate the talent a little better. I mean, they don't have a problem with evaluating the talented players, but off the field stuff is like, wait a minute.
Oh God.
Yeah, right. Okay, so yeah, you can play real good on the field, but off the field, not so much. So
shout out to Antonio Brown.
I have never seen such a talented wide receiver in my life. And I got to watch the likes of Blitnikoff and Blanda and um Ghost to the Post, and I got to see all that stuff. I got to see Lynn Swan. I got to see Jerry Rice. I got to see them guys, right? Kellen Winslow and all these great receivers. I got to see all them guys. Mm-hmm. Randy Moss, when he first came in the league, and was like, whoa, when Chris Carter first came in the league, and was like, whoa, right? Okay, yeah. Got to see all these. Antonio Brown, I have never seen a wide receiver who could run the routes like he did and catch the ball like he did and get open like he did and then make yards after the catch like he did.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree.
I've never seen that my whole life, and all the times and all the wide receivers I've ever watched in my whole life, I have never seen a guy as talented as he was at playing that position and being the man. Those 6 years were the most prolific wide receiver years we've seen in the NFL, right? You can't deny that.
Probably, and statistically, I think that might actually be backed up factually. I know that Ben Roethlisberger and Antonio Brown were a more efficient duo statistically than like Brady and Moss and all this other stuff. They were, for all intents and purposes, the best duo of all time.
Agreed.
And that's crazy. I Antonio Brown, I've never seen a route runner like him. And like route running is it. In fighting, I love defense. I love footwork and head movement, and I love good route running in football. And I have never seen anybody get 10 yards away from two people covering him at once so effortlessly than Antonio Brown. He made corners look foolish for a decade. It was crazy.
I've never seen anybody make that wide receiver screen work so well.
Yeah.
As Antonio Brown, because he could just catch the ball, and then the next thing you know, he's 15 yards up the field. Because
they're still trying to replicate it a decade later.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I think we've covered a lot here in this Revive show. Yeah, let's call it a Revive show. We're going to be doing this here on a regular basis. We're going to be talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers here. And we might call this Steel's Corner. Or we might call it Steel and Gage Corner. I don't know. We'll have to come think about it. But at any rate, thank you, Gage, for hopping on here, buddy. And why don't you tell the folks where we can find you and where we can follow you, sir?
You can find me on Twitter at Gage Ryan Video. You can find my Yu-Gi-Oh content on YouTube at Gage Ryan Video. You can find my MMA content, Contender MMA, and you can find 5-Star Matchup, which is all of our collective Pittsburgh Steelers content that goes on the main channel, so to speak, at 5-Star Matchup. So that's where you can find us.
Awesome sauce, man. Well, thank you very much for hopping on here. I'm your host, Ron SteelFlyers, and this has been the SteelFlyers video cast or video podcast or whatever. We're talking about the Steelers here. And we talked about the Pittsburgh Steelers signing Aron Rodgers. We also talked about training camp, our grades, and then kind of what we're looking forward to here in the future. So thank you very much for joining us. Just remember, folks, stay safe, stay strong, and hang tough.